Hello folks, welcome back to the channel. Today is a very special day, and it's all thanks to you. We've officially hit 100 subscribers. Can you believe it? I mean, I know 100 might not seem like a huge number to some, but to me, it's absolutely incredible. Every single one of you has helped bring this channel to life. Whether you've been here since the very beginning or just joined us recently, your support means everything. Thank you. I'll definitely be releasing a 100 sub special very soon, so stay tuned. But that's enough talk for now. Sit back, relax, and let's dive into today's story. Jake and I had been best friends since grade school. He was the kind of guy who lit up every room he walked into, always cracking jokes, always scheming up wild plans. So when Jake disappeared, it didn't just leave a void in my life. It ripped a hole straight through it. The last time I saw him was over a year ago. We'd been at our favorite dive bar, talking about life, work, and all the things we'd do once we finally made it. He was cracking jokes about how his boring office job was sucking the life out of him. A week later, he stopped answering my texts. At first, I thought he was just in one of his off-the-grid phases. He'd do that sometimes, disappear for a few days to clear his head. But when days turned into weeks, I knew something was wrong. His family filed a missing persons report, but the cops didn't have much to go on. No signs of foul play, no unusual bank activity. It was like he'd just evaporated. His coworkers didn't have any answers either. He'd left the office on a Friday like usual, and by Monday, he was gone. Months passed, and life moved on, at least for everyone else. His parents seemed resigned to the idea that he was gone for good. Even his sister stopped calling me for updates. But I couldn't let it go. Jake wasn't the kind of person who'd just walk away from everything. He'd have told me if something was wrong. Then one day, out of nowhere, his sister reached out. She'd been cleaning out Jake's old apartment and found a laptop he used to keep hidden. "Maybe there's something in there," she said, handing it over. I didn't know it then, but that laptop would lead me down a rabbit hole I'd never escape from. The laptop was ancient, dusty, and held together with duct tape. When I booted it up, I was met with a password screen. I tried all the obvious guesses, his birthday, his dog's name, even some inside jokes we used to share. Nothing worked. It took me weeks to crack it. I ended up using a YouTube tutorial on how to bypass basic security measures. When I finally got in, the desktop was nearly empty, just a few folders and a text document. At first glance, it didn't seem like much, but one folder, buried deep in the file structure, caught my eye. It was labeled Haven. Inside were dozens of links, all a string of random characters ending in .onion. I didn't know much about the dark web, but I knew enough to recognize what I was looking at. These were sites you couldn't access through a normal browser. I found myself staring at the screen, torn between curiosity and dread. I debated whether to even open one of the links, but the thought of Jake, where he might be, what he might have been involved in, pushed me forward. I downloaded the Tor browser and clicked the first link. What I saw made my stomach churn. It was a dark web forum, a place where anonymity reigned and morality was non-existent. The topics ranged from conspiracy theories to illegal activities I couldn't even bring myself to read about. But as I explored further, I found something even darker. A section dedicated to missing persons. The missing persons section was exactly what it sounded like. Photos of people, young, old, men, women, all listed with chilling captions like healthy, obedient, perfect for domestic service, or prime organ donor material. I kept scrolling, my hands trembling. Then I saw it. Jake's photo stared back at me from the screen. It was blurry and poorly lit, but there was no mistaking it. The scar above his left eyebrow, the slightly crooked smile. I knew it was him. The caption read, "Male, 25, intelligent, strong build. Starting bid, 30 BTC. I froze. My chest tightened as I reread the description, hoping I was wrong. But it was Jake, the friend I'd laughed with, argued with, grown up with. Now he was reduced to a commodity, something to be sold to the highest bidder. The first thing I did was call the police. I showed them the laptop, the dark web links, and Jake's listing. But they barely took me seriously. "The dark web is full of hoaxes," one of the officers said. "It's probably some sick prank." When I pressed them, they promised to look into it, but their tone made it clear they didn't believe me. They thought I was some paranoid friend clinging to false hope. Even Jake's family didn't believe me. His sister was polite but dismissive, and his parents didn't even return my calls. I was on my own. Desperation clawed at me. I couldn't just sit back and do nothing. If no one else was going to save Jake, I had to do it myself. I spent hours researching how to navigate the dark web safely. I created fake accounts, used a VPN, and read every guide I could find. But I knew I couldn't do it alone. That's when I found Voidwalker. Voidwalker was a user on one of the forums, notorious for helping people find information for a price. I messaged them, explaining my situation. They didn't respond for days, and I thought I'd been ghosted. But then, late one night, a single reply appeared. "What are you offering?" I didn't have much. I wasn't rich or connected, but I offered everything I could. Money, favors, whatever it took. Eventually, they agreed. Voidwalker wasn't cheap. I had to convert all my savings into Bitcoin just to keep them interested. But in return, they gave me access to Haven, a forum so exclusive it required an invite to join. The first thing that struck me about Haven was how organized it was. It wasn't the chaotic mess I'd imagined the dark web to be. Instead, it was sleek, professional, like some twisted version of Craigslist. The missing persons exchange had its own section, with filters for age, gender, and even condition. I felt sick as I browsed through the listings. Jake's profile was still there, but now it had a countdown timer. The auction was set to go live in 4 days. I knew I didn't have much time. I sat in the dark, the only light coming from the auction site still open on my screen. Jake's face stared back at me, frozen in that haunting photo. Every instinct screamed at me to shut it all down and pretend I never saw it. But that wasn't an option. Not anymore. I scrolled down, my hands trembling. The auction details were sparse. Lot Scamora 46, male 27, physically healthy, no major illnesses, spirited. Spirited, like he was a goddamn horse or a collector's item. Bile rose in my throat, but I forced myself to keep reading. The bids were in the tens of thousands. Numbers rising steadily from anonymous accounts. "Jake, what the hell have you gotten into?" I whispered. I needed answers, and the only way to get them was to dig deeper into this vile rabbit hole. But doing that meant walking into a world where people like Jake were nothing more than merchandise, and I didn't know if I'd come out the other side unscathed. The auction site wasn't the only feature. There was also a chat room. Its title, Buyers and Sellers Only. Clicking on it felt like opening Pandora's box. The room was filled with conversations, each message more chilling than the last. Lot 46 looks like a fun one. Any details on prior experience? When is the transport happening? Need discretion as usual. Got any more young ones? Looking for something under 20? I clenched my fists so hard my knuckles went white. These weren't people. They were predators. Monsters parading as humans. My heart nearly stopped when I saw a user named Auction Admin type into the chat. Reminder: payment clears by midnight. No exceptions. Lot number 46 goes live at 10 p.m. tomorrow. Good luck, bidders. Tomorrow. Jake had less than 24 hours before he was sold to God knows who. I jumped into the chat, typing furiously. Who is lot number 46? Where is he being kept? How do I get him out? The response came almost instantly. Who invited the Boy Scout? A wave of laughter-filled messages followed, mocking me. Another one of those heroes. They never last long. Good luck, buddy, you'll need it. And then came a direct message from Auction Admin. It was brief but chilling. Stick your nose in where it doesn't belong and you'll be next. I slammed my laptop shut, my heart pounding like a drum. For a moment, I considered stopping there, turning it all off, pretending I hadn't seen anything. But Jake's face kept flashing in my mind. That hollow look. The bruises. He wouldn't give up on me, and I couldn't give up on him. I spent the next few hours pulling together what I'd need. A burner laptop, a VPN strong enough to withstand any attempts to track me, and every ounce of courage I had. I was going to do what the cops couldn't. Find out where Jake was being held, and stop this nightmare. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a new text from an unknown number. Last warning. Stop now. Attached was a photo of my apartment building. They knew where I lived. Despite the threat, I logged back onto the dark web, this time with tighter security. I went straight to the chat room. To my surprise, someone messaged me privately. The username was Lot 46 Watcher. Looking for lot number 46? The message read. I hesitated, then typed back. Yes. Do you know where he is? There was a long pause before the reply came. Maybe. But if you want info, you'll have to pay. I don't do charity. My stomach churned. I couldn't trust this person, but I didn't have a choice. How much? $2,000. Bitcoin. I didn't have that kind of money. But Jake's life was on the line. I emptied my savings account and converted it into Bitcoin. Within an hour, I sent the payment. True to their word, Lot 46 Watcher sent me coordinates. A warehouse on the outskirts of the city. I arrived at the location just before dusk, parking my car a block away and approaching on foot. The warehouse loomed like a tombstone, its windows boarded up and its walls stained with graffiti. I crept around the perimeter, looking for an entry point. A side door, slightly ajar, caught my eye. The inside was worse than I'd imagined. Rows of cages lined the walls, each one filled with terrified, broken people. Their muffled cries and whispered prayers echoed in the darkness. But Jake wasn't in any of them. A voice behind me sent a chill down my spine. Looking for someone? I turned to see a man, his face obscured by a balaclava. He held a gun, and his posture radiated menace. "Lot 946, right?" he sneered. "You're too late." The man lunged at me, but adrenaline took over. I swung my flashlight at his head, knocking him off balance. He fired a shot that ricocheted off the metal cages, and chaos erupted. The captives screamed, rattling their cages. I didn't wait to see if the man got back up. I bolted through the nearest door and into the night. As I ran, I heard shouting behind me, followed by the screech of tires. A van roared to life and sped after me. I ducked into an alley, my heart pounding. The van slowed, its headlights sweeping the area, but I managed to stay hidden. Eventually, it drove off. I returned home, battered and defeated. Jake was gone. Whether he'd been sold or killed, I would never know. The guilt was suffocating, but I had to accept the grim reality. I reported everything to the authorities, but they couldn't do much. The auction site vanished overnight, leaving no trace. Packing my belongings was harder than I thought. Every photo, every memento, every familiar item felt like a chain tethering me to a past that was no longer safe. I couldn't stay here. Not after what I'd seen. Not after what I'd done. They knew where I lived, and every creak of the floorboards or knock on the door sent my heart racing. I was a marked man, and if I stayed, it was only a matter of time before they came for me. I left the city before sunrise, my car loaded with everything I could fit. No forwarding address, no goodbyes. I deleted my social media, changed my number, and cashed out my bank accounts. The further I drove, the more detached I felt. It wasn't freedom. I knew that much. It was survival. I landed in a small town several states away, one of those places with a single diner and more cows than people. The kind of place where the only noise at night was the rustle of wind through the trees. It was supposed to be peaceful, but for me, it was suffocatingly silent. Every sound, crickets chirping, a car engine in the distance, felt like a threat. I found a job working night shifts at a gas station. It was mindless work, but that was what I needed. Something to distract me, something to keep my hands busy. The pay was lousy, but I didn't care. Money wasn't my priority anymore. Staying invisible was. But even in this quiet town, paranoia clung to me like a second skin. I kept my laptop hidden under my bed, wrapped in blankets as if that could shield it from the dark web's reach. Every few days, I'd check to see if there was any news about the auction site, any sign that it had resurfaced. It hadn't. At least, not that I could find. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone somewhere was watching me. It wasn't just a feeling. It was a certainty. The paranoia gnawed at me day and night. Every time my phone buzzed with a new notification, my chest tightened. I started letting calls from unknown numbers go straight to voicemail. Even texts from coworkers or the utility company made me jump. I began seeing faces in the crowd, faces that looked too familiar to be a coincidence. At the grocery store, a man with a dark jacket lingered in the same aisle as me for too long. At the gas station, a black car parked at the edge of the lot for hours, its windows tinted so dark I couldn't see inside. One night, as I walked home from work, I swore I heard footsteps behind me. They weren't hurried, but they matched my pace, each step a mirror of my own. I turned around, my heart pounding, but the street was empty. I told myself it was nothing, just my overactive imagination. But the footsteps didn't stop. I broke into a run, not caring if I looked like a lunatic. My apartment was only a block away, and I didn't stop until I was inside, the door locked and bolted behind me. I pressed my ear against the door, listening. Nothing. I barely slept that night. Every creak of the old building setting my nerves on edge. The next morning, I found a note slipped under my door. It was a single piece of paper with 4 words scrawled in red ink. "We haven't forgotten you." That note was the final straw. I called in sick to work and spent the entire day packing. My plan to stay in this small town and fade into obscurity had failed. If they'd found me once, they could find me again. I didn't know who they were. The buyers, the sellers, the faceless administrators who ran the auction. But I knew they weren't going to stop. I moved again, this time even further away. Another state, another town, another name. I changed my appearance, cut my hair, grew a beard, even started wearing glasses I didn't need. Anything to make myself harder to recognize. But no matter how far I ran, I couldn't escape the memories. Jake's face haunted me every night. Not the Jake I remembered from our school days, but the Jake from the auction site. Hollow-eyed, bruised, resigned. What happened to him after that night at the warehouse? Was he sold to some deranged buyer? Did they kill him when I interfered? I'd never know, and that uncertainty was its own kind of torture. The note under my door replayed in my mind, over and over. "We haven't forgotten you." I wondered how many others had tried to intervene, like me, and failed. How many people had stumbled onto that dark web abyss, thinking they could help, only to become victims themselves. How many had been silenced, bought or sold, their stories erased like they never existed. I was one of the lucky ones, or so I told myself. I escaped with my life, but it wasn't much of a life anymore. Every shadow was a threat, every stranger a potential enemy. Even now, as I write this, I can't shake the feeling that someone is watching. Maybe they're reading this, laughing at my paranoia. Maybe they're planning their next move. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. No one escapes the dark web entirely. Not me, not Jake, and not the countless others who didn't get away.